On what seemed like a normal flight, a 17-year-old girl had her yellow beanie yanked off her head by a flight attendant right in front of the eyes of dozens of passengers. No apology, no valid reason, just according to safety regulations. But strangely, the other passengers continued to wear their hats, none of them being reprimanded except for this girl. Amira Williams' eyes filled with confusion, hurt and disbelief, wondered why she had become the target. The yellow beanie, a gift from her father, an item she wore every day as a reminder of her family, amidst the divided life after the divorce, lay silently on the airplane floor, just like her self-respect at that moment. But what the flight attendant didn't know was that Amira wasn't an ordinary passenger. She was the daughter of Celeste Williams, the CEO of the airline, and just a few hours later, when Celeste stepped onto the jet bridge, her cold face and quiet eyes scanning the entire crew, everyone knew that the storm had truly begun. Is there anyone here who wants to explain to me why my daughter was treated like this on a plane operated by my company? One question, one yellow beanie, one voice, and from that moment, a revolution in the airline industry began. Today, you will follow the emotional and powerful story of a young girl who unknowingly lit the beacon for injustice, and of a powerful mother who didn't use her power to shield her, but to change an entire system. The hat fell onto the plane's cabin floor, a vivid splash of gold against the gray-blue carpet. Amira Collins, the 17-year-old girl, froze her hands still hovering where her beloved hat had been snatched away only seconds ago. The flight attendant, a blonde woman with her hair neatly tied in a ponytail, her lips pressed into a straight line, stood towering over Amira, her hand still outstretched from the quick snatch. "I've warned you 3 times already," she said, her voice echoing in the now silent cabin. No hats during the safety demonstration. Amira's eyes burned not with tears, but with the searing humiliation. Dozens of eyes were trained on her, some curious, some uncomfortable, and others seemingly satisfied, to witness a teenager being taught a lesson. She reached down to pick up her hat, but the flight attendant's foot slid forward, blocking her way. "You'll get it back when the plane reaches cruising altitude," the attendant said. Amira's expression no doubt betrayed her hurt as the older man seated beside her shifted uneasily. "Excuse me, but she's just a child." "Yes, and I'm following company policy," the flight attendant interrupted, not letting him finish. "Now please pay attention to the safety demonstration," she added, turning away. That was when the chaos started at the front of the cabin. A tall woman in a well-tailored gray suit was walking briskly toward the back, her strides purposeful like someone used to giving orders. Her skin, several shades darker than Amira's, gleamed with barely contained anger. Yet her voice was the opposite calm to the point of being chilling. "Miss Langford," she said, her eyes flicking to the name tag. "Step aside." The flight attendant Langford, her face previously set in a mask of authority, now paled. "Ma'am, please return to your seat. The plane is about to. I am Celeste Collins, CEO of Aurora Airways," the woman said, her voice neither loud nor aggressive, but carrying clearly throughout the cabin. "And that is my daughter." The entire cabin fell utterly silent. 12 hours earlier, Celeste had stood by the kitchen window in her high-rise apartment, watching the sunrise, turning the harbor city skyline into a golden silhouette. Even after 5 years of living here, she still found herself in awe of the view each morning. "Did you bring your phone charger?" Celeste asked, hearing her daughter's footsteps in the hallway. "And your cold medicine. You know how your nose gets every time a plane takes off." Amira appeared in the kitchen doorway dragging a large suitcase behind her. At 17, she had grown taller than her mother with a sporty build like her father's. Her curls were neatly styled, and perched on top of her head was her bright yellow beanie, a gift from her father before they divorced 3 years ago. "I'm fine, Mom." "It's not my first flight," Amira said, plucking an apple from the fruit bowl. "I've been flying back and forth between you and Dad since I was 14. Celeste nodded, setting her coffee cup on the table. "I know, it's just this is the first time you're flying alone since the last custody hearing." Things had been relatively smooth before that, but everything had become complicated 6 months ago when her ex-husband, Noah Rivers, moved from Stanton to Suncrest Bay for work. The geographical distance forced them to reconsider the custody agreement, and the negotiations hadn't been easy. "Dad's not mad at me, Mom. He's just mad at the situation," Amira said, biting into the apple. "I'm kind of excited, though. He said the new house is less than 20 minutes from the beach." Celeste bit her lip, holding back words she might later regret. Noah had always been the fun dad, while Celeste took care of homework and curfews. Now that they were nearly 5,000 kilometers apart, she worried that the distance would only widen the gap between them. "I don't want to make this harder for you," Celeste said gently. "It's just, you're going to have to deal with the time zone differences." "And I'm fine," Mom Amira interrupted, placing half the apple on the table and walking over to hug her mother. "I've got music books and enough snacks to survive the apocalypse." Celeste embraced her daughter, smelling the familiar coconut oil in her hair. "I know you're fine. I'm just being a mom." "CEO, Mom, you need to relax a bit." Amira laughed, then stepped back. "Don't you have a flight to Clearview in 3 hours? Celeste glanced at her watch and muttered under her breath. "Board meeting I completely forgot. Go prepare. I'll call the car service." Amira quickly grabbed her mother's phone. 20 minutes later, they stood in the elevator heading down to the building's lobby. Celeste was now dressed in a sharp suit, double-checking her papers before her important meeting. "If anything happens, anything at all, remember to call me," she said while adjusting Amira's beanie. "And tell Dad to text me when you get there." Safely, Amira rolled her eyes, though her gaze was full of affection. "Sure, Mom, I'll even remind him about the vegetable study time and phone limits." The elevator doors opened and they stepped into the marble lobby, greeted by the doorman's familiar nod. "Miss Collins, your car is ready," he said, pointing to the black sedan parked outside. "Thank you," Elliot Celeste replied, then turned to her daughter. "Your car should arrive in about 15 minutes, right?" Amira nodded. "Gate 27, Terminal 4. Everything's saved in my phone already." Celeste Collins hesitated for a moment before pulling her daughter into one last tight, heartfelt hug. "I love you, sweetie. You know that, right?" "I know," Mom Amira whispered back. "I love you too." As Celeste sat in the back seat of the waiting sedan, she tried to push aside the vague feeling of unease that had clung to her. A sensation without any clear reason. Amira had made this trip many times before, but this time, something felt different. She turned to look back through the window. Her daughter was still standing in the building's lobby, the bright yellow beanie standing out against the refined marble floor. Celeste forced a smile and waved as the car pulled away, unaware that an unexpected coincidence would bring them together sooner than either of them could ever have imagined, in a way no one could foresee. On the other side of the country, Noah Rivers had just hung up the phone, standing still amidst the unpacked boxes scattered across the new living room. The sunlight from the Suncrest Bay coastline poured through the large window, revealing the messy apartment that he still hadn't managed to tidy up. "Damn it, Celeste," he muttered, running a hand through his short hair. The call had been as tense as he had predicted. Celeste always made him feel like he was a few steps behind, especially when it came to co-parenting. Her reminder about Amira's flight, as if he hadn't set 3 alarms to make sure he didn't forget, was just one of the many subtle hints that he wasn't doing enough as a father. His phone buzzed and a message from Amira appeared. "I'm on the way to the airport. Can't wait to see you." Noah smiled, the frustration ebbing away. Amira always knew how to calm him down from the time she was a little girl. A simple hug was enough to melt away all his worries. The older she got, the sharper, more thoughtful, she became his greatest pride. He quickly typed a reply. "Travel safe, Princess. I'll be waiting for you at baggage claim with your favorite strawberry smoothie. Love you." Setting his phone down, Noah tried to refocus on his unfinished tasks. When the opportunity for the creative director role at a top West Coast architecture firm in Suncrest Bay came up, he had hesitated. It was a dream job, but far from his daughter. The agreement was for Amira to visit for the entire week, during every break, something Celeste had reluctantly agreed to. A knock on the door snapped him out of his thoughts. When he opened it, he saw a woman smiling, holding a small potted plant. "Housewarming gift," she said, handing him a succulent. "I saw you moved in last week. Everyone should have at least one plant that's hard to kill." Noah chuckled, taking it. "Thanks, but I should warn you, I don't exactly have a green thumb." "It's a succulent. You'd have to try pretty hard to kill it." She smiled. "I'm Alina Torres 4C, Noah 4B, obviously," he replied, pointing toward the door behind him. "I'd invite you in, but as you can see, it's a bit of a disaster in here." Alina glanced at the pile of boxes and nodded sympathetically. "Moving is a nightmare. By the way, we usually gather for drinks on the rooftop every Friday. You should come. It'll be a lot more fun than eating noodles in the middle of a cardboard jungle." Noah nodded, feeling a little grateful. "Thanks, I'll think about it, but my daughter's flying in today. She'll be here the whole week." "Take her along," Alina said playfully. "There are a few teens in the building. Maybe she'll make some new friends." After Alina left, Noah placed the plant on the kitchen counter and checked the time. It was almost time to head to the airport. He had checked the map twice, including the usual traffic jam in Suncrest Bay, but he still felt uneasy. This visit had to be perfect. He needed it to be perfect to prove to Celeste and to himself that moving here wasn't a mistake. His phone rang. Noah guessed it was Celeste continuing her reminder routine, but no, it was Richard, his new boss. "Noah, hate to bother you on your day off, but the Jensen clients arrived early and want to see the designs." Now Noah closed his eyes, knowing what was coming. "Richard, my daughter arrives in 3 hours. I can't. I get it, really. But this is the biggest contract of the year. The meeting won't take more than an hour. You can present and still make it to the airport on time." He glanced at his watch, doing the mental math. If everything went smoothly, he could make it just barely. "All right," he reluctantly agreed. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. But Richard, I need to leave the office by 2:30. "Got it. I owe you one." Hanging up, Noah quickly changed into more professional attire, shoved the design portfolio into his bag, and left the apartment. Before closing the door, he sent Amira another message. "There's been a slight change of plans. I might be a little late. If so, wait for me at baggage claim. I'll definitely be there." As he locked the door, a tight knot formed in his stomach. He was doing the one thing he'd promised himself never to do, putting work ahead of his daughter. Celeste's voice echoed in his head. "You're still the same, Noah. You'll never change." He shook his head, stuffed the keys into his pocket, and hurried down to the parking lot, determined to make this time different. At Harbor Central Airport, the familiar hustle and bustle of a weekend afternoon was in full swing. In the security line, the bright yellow beanie made Amira Collins stand out, easily recognizable amid the sea of people. Standing in the security line at Harbor Central Airport, Amira Collins pulled out her phone, replied to messages from her friends, and checked the flight status on time, meaning she'd reach Suncrest Bay as scheduled unless there was some weather issue. She'd texted her dad about half an hour ago but hadn't received a reply. Not unusual, Noah was infamous for losing his phone, especially when he was working, still combined with the previous message saying he might be late. Amira couldn't help but feel that familiar sensation, a sense of being just another afterthought in her father's schedule. "Hey, it's your turn," the TSA agent called. Snapping Amira out of her thoughts, she stuffed her phone into her backpack, took off her shoes, and placed everything onto the conveyor belt. As she waited to retrieve her things from the other side of the scanner, Amira accidentally caught a glimpse of her reflection in the glass, nearby the yellow beanie, oversized hoodie leggings, and her worn sneakers just the unofficial uniform of any teenager on a journey. That beanie was a birthday gift from her dad when she turned 14, just weeks before he and her mom sat her down to talk about their divorce. Your dad saw this and thought of you. He'd said when she opened the gift, "Yellow for the bright personality of my daughter." Since then, she rarely took it off much, to her mother's occasional frustration. Celeste Collins always believed that one should dress in a way that aligned with the image they wanted to project. Though she never outright said it, Amira could always catch the quick glances that hinted at her mother's disapproval. After collecting her things, Amira walked toward her gate. The terminal was crowded full of all sorts of people, from business travelers to families going on vacation, just like any typical day at an airport like Harbor Central. As she passed through the main area, she suddenly spotted a familiar figure ahead, a woman in a gray suit, her hair neatly tied up, walking briskly through the crowd. Mom Amira called, quickening her pace to catch up. Celeste turned around, clearly surprised when she saw her daughter. "Amira, what are you doing here? I thought your gate was in Terminal 4. "Yeah, it is," Amira said, pointing behind her. "I'm headed there, but what about you? Aren't you flying to Clearview?" Celeste glanced at her watch. About 40 minutes left. The plane had a delay, so they changed the gate. Her eyes scanned her daughter's face. "Are you okay? You don't seem quite at ease." Amira shrugged, adjusting her beanie. "I'm fine. Dad texted saying he might be a little late because of work." A brief flicker passed through Celeste's gaze, disappointment, or perhaps more an acknowledgement of something she already knew, and then she quickly regained her composure. "I'm sure he'll make it in time, and if not, you know how to call a ride back to your dad's place, right?" "Mom, I'm 17, not 7. I can get myself from the airport to his house." Celeste nodded, but her eyes still carried a hint of concern. "Of course you can. It's just that." She paused, perhaps thinking more carefully about what she was about to say. "Text me when you get there, okay? And if anything happens, call you immediately." Amira finished for her hearing that line one too many times. Got it. The intercom chimed, announcing that Celeste's flight was now boarding. "Your flight's calling," now she said, glancing quickly toward the gate. "I'd better go." The two exchanged a brief hug, and then Celeste quickly merged with the crowd, boarding the plane. Amira stood still, watching her mother disappear into the crowd, a familiar feeling rising within her, like she was stuck between two worlds, one with her mom structured, disciplined, successful, the other with her dad, creative, free-spirited, but sometimes chaotic. Sighing, she turned back toward her gate, unaware that just a few hours later her mother would return to her life in the most unexpected way. At over 9,000 meters above the Midwest, Celeste Collins stared out the airplane window, watching the gleaming patches of farmland below as the late afternoon sun lit up the landscape. In her hand, she held the quarterly financial report, but her mind wandered back to her encounter with her daughter at the airport. Noah possibly being late irked her, not because this time was especially important, but because it was part of a series of disappointments she'd become all too familiar with since the divorce. Celia Collins. "Anything I can get you?" A flight attendant's voice snapped Celeste from her thoughts. She looked up, recognizing Teresa, a longtime employee. "A glass of water, please." "Thank you." Teresa lowered her voice as she poured the water. "I just wanted to say, the new maternity leave policy you implemented, it's really been a lifesaver for my daughter. She just had her first baby, and being able to take 6 months of paid leave has made everything so much easier." Celeste smiled, genuinely moved. "Congratulations to your daughter. I'm so happy to hear that Teresa moved on to serve other passengers." And Celeste's phone buzzed. Despite being in the air, she had special access to the internal network of Aurora Airways. A message from her assistant appeared. "Urgent meeting in 20 minutes. Thompson is threatening to stop the Suncrest expansion if the route isn't reassigned. Needs CEO approval. ASAP." Celeste stifled a sigh. Stanley Thompson had always been a thorn in her side since she became CEO. He'd never hidden his belief that her rise had been too fast and that the personnel reforms were eating away at profits. Record-high employee retention and soaring customer satisfaction meant nothing to him. Celeste typed quickly, "Prepare the call. I'll join from the air." Just as she sent it, another message appeared, this time from Noah. "Busy with work, probably won't make it to pick up Amira. Can you help her with a ride? I'll reimburse you." Celeste felt a fire stir in her chest. Not only was he not picking up their daughter, but now he was pushing the task of telling her on to her, leaving her to be the bearer of disappointment instead of him. Celeste Collins began to type a response filled with frustration, but stopped. She deleted everything she had written, took a deep breath, and slowly typed, "Instead, I'm on a flight to Clearview for the urgent board meeting. You should reach out to Amira yourself." She hesitated for a moment before pressing send, then added one more line. "She was worried you would be late when I met her at the airport. Don't let her down. Noah." After sending the message, Celeste switched her phone to Do Not Disturb mode and tried to refocus on the documents preparing for the upcoming meeting. But her mind kept drifting back to Amira and the familiar cycle repeating itself once again. A successful career woman who always felt like a failure when it came to protecting her daughter from disappointments. Celeste had built her career by making tough decisions with incomplete information. She rose from a marketing director to vice president and then CEO of Aurora Airways, all within a decade within a male-dominated industry through strategic sharpness and unwavering determination. But all those achievements seemed meaningless whenever she thought about how her daughter might be hurting, and there was nothing she could do about it in that moment. The fastened seatbelt sign dinged. The captain's voice came over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're entering an area of unexpected turbulence. Please return to your seats and fasten your seatbelt." Celeste closed her tablet just as the plane jolted. The screen displayed a new notification. The board meeting was pushed forward by 15 minutes due to Thompson's schedule. She would have to attend the meeting while the plane was still shaking. She glanced at the clock, mentally calculating the time difference. On the west coast, Amira was about to board the flight to Suncrest Bay. Celeste only hoped her daughter's journey would be smoother than hers, both literally and figuratively. On the flight to Suncrest Bay, Amira Collins was settled into the window seat. She shoved her backpack under the seat in front of her, silently grateful that the middle seat was still unoccupied, a rare stroke of luck for a 6-hour flight. The aisle seat was occupied by an older man who nodded politely as she passed. Then quickly returned to his book. Amira checked her phone one last time before switching it to airplane mode, hoping for a message from her dad. But there was still nothing new. The last message from Noah was vague, and his lack of further responses left a nagging sense of unease creeping inside her. Would he make it in time, or would she have to figure things out on her own in the vast airport in Suncrest? No texts, no responses. She sighed, turned off her phone, and stuffed it into her hoodie pocket. Then she took off her familiar yellow beanie, placed it gently on her lap, and rested her head against the window, watching as the ground crew prepared for the flight. The middle seat remained empty until the very last moment when a woman dressed in business attire hurried onto the plane, glancing at her seat number while walking. "This must be my seat," she said, pointing to the spot next to Amira. Amira nodded, shifting slightly to make room as the woman sat down. She placed her expensive handbag under the seat, breathing heavily as she fastened her seatbelt. Just in time, she murmured almost to herself. The connecting flight was delayed. Amira gave a polite smile, but turned her face back toward the window, not in the mood for a conversation. Her mind still spun with thoughts of whether her dad would show up. The flight attendant started her safety demonstration walk. A blonde woman with her hair tightly tied in a ponytail and a stern expression walked down the aisle to their row. "Excuse me, ma'am, your bag needs to be completely under the seat," she told the woman sitting next to Amira. The woman immediately adjusted her handbag without a word. Then the flight attendant's gaze fell on the yellow beanie on Amira's lap. "You'll need to either wear it or stow it during takeoff and landing," she said, her voice noticeably colder than before. "Oh, sorry," Amira said, quickly putting the beanie back on. The flight attendant, whose name tag read Langford, nodded slightly and moved on. The man sitting across the aisle caught Amira's eye and gave a slight shrug as if to say, "Some people just like to make things harder for others." As the safety demonstration began, Amira only half listened, her thoughts drifting toward the future, waiting for her in Suncrest Bay, where her dad was beginning his new life. This was her first visit to her dad's new house, and though she tried to appear excited in front of her mom inside, she was a mess of emotions, excited, nervous, and scared. Would there be a place for her in this new life, or would she be just an uninvited guest? "Excuse me, ma'am, please remove your hat during the safety demonstration." Langford's voice rang out, snapping Amira back to the present. She blinked, slightly confused. "Oh, I didn't know that was a rule," she said, reaching up to take the hat off. "It's for your safety," Langford replied, but there was no hint of concern in her tone. Amira took off the hat and placed it back on her lap, gently smoothing down her flattened curls. When she looked up, she noticed several other passengers still wearing hats, baseball caps, wide-brimmed hats, even cowboy hats a few rows ahead. But no one else was being reprimanded. The man across the aisle furrowed his brow clearly. He noticed it too, but he remained silent. A familiar, uncomfortable feeling rose within her. Being singled out. Without saying a word, Amira knew sometimes there were rules, just for certain people. She tried to force herself to listen to the rest of the safety instructions, oxygen masks, but her mind kept drifting back to the hat on her lap. It wasn't just an accessory, it was a lifeline connecting her to her father, the anchor in a life divided by divorce. When the demonstration ended, Amira reached to put the hat back on, but Langford appeared again this time, standing right beside their row. "Please keep the hat off until the plane reaches cruising altitude," she said, her eyes locked onto Amira's unblinking, "Is this really necessary?" The woman sitting next to Amira spoke up for the first time, her voice calm but firm. "I've flown so many times, and I've never heard of that rule." "It's the airline's policy, ma'am, flight attendant," Langford replied coldly. "For safety reasons," the woman looked skeptical, but said nothing more. Langford walked off, continuing to check other rows. Amira noticed a black girl a few rows ahead who was looking in her direction. The girl gave her a small knowing smile, a silent yet very clear gesture of understanding. Amira turned her gaze to the window as the plane began to taxi down the runway. Her fingers traced the familiar lines of her yellow beanie in her lap. A small act of rebellion against the arbitrary rule that seemed to apply only to her. The meeting had run longer than expected. Of course it did. Noah Rivers was stuck in a traffic jam around Suncrest Bay, his fingers drumming repeatedly on the steering wheel. As the clock on the dashboard ticked minute by minute, Amira's flight had landed over 20 minutes ago, and he still had at least 15 minutes to reach the airport, assuming traffic cleared up. He had called her twice, but both calls went straight to voicemail. Maybe Amira was still waiting for the plane to fully stop, or perhaps she had just entered the airport. He left a message explaining that he was running late and telling her to wait in the baggage claim area. The traffic inched forward, making Noah want to slam his hand on the horn. He had promised Celeste that he would be on time, that moving to Suncrest Bay wouldn't affect his relationship with his daughter. But now, at the first hurdle, he had already failed. His phone rang. He quickly connected it via Bluetooth, hoping it was Amira. "Hello," he answered, urgently. "Noah, it's Richard. Just calling to thank you again for stepping in today. The Jensen clients were really impressed with the presentation. I think this deal is definitely going our way." Noah suppressed a sigh. "Glad to hear it, Richard. But right now I'm stuck in traffic trying to get to the airport to pick up my daughter." "Oh, right. Sorry." "Of course. Have a great weekend with your daughter. And Noah, really, you saved the whole team today. I won't forget it." The call ended, and Noah resumed tapping his fingers on the steering wheel. The success at work today suddenly felt hollow in the face of his failure as a father. Finally, the traffic began to clear, and Noah accelerated, trying to make up for lost time. In his head, he repeated his explanations and apologies. How could he make Amira understand that this didn't mean she wasn't important? That sometimes the responsibilities of adulthood created unforeseen circumstances. Would she see this as just another time when he put work before family, the very thing that had contributed to the breakdown of his marriage with Celeste? He turned into the pickup area at Gate 4, quickly scanning the crowd for the familiar figure, her bright yellow beanie. But it wasn't there. He drove into the short-term parking lot and hurried into the terminal, his heart racing with anxiety and guilt. The baggage claim area was busy, but Amira wasn't there. He checked the flight information board again. Yes, the plane had landed almost 40 minutes ago. Plenty of time for passengers to deplane, grab their luggage, and head out. A cold shiver ran down his spine. He pulled out his phone and tried calling again. No connection. He sent a message. "I'm at baggage claim. Where are you?" Then he ran to the information desk, trying to keep his voice calm as he explained the situation. The clerk tapped at her computer. "Yes, that flight landed on time, but I can't provide passenger information." "She's 17. Noah said, his voice tense. "She might have gone to the wrong pickup area." "If it's an unaccompanied minor, the airline would have a representative with them." The clerk said, "No, she's not registered as an unaccompanied minor." Noah exhaled. "She's 17, has flown many times before, but this is her first time flying to see me in Suncrest Bay, and—" He stopped, unwilling to admit that he hadn't been there on time. The clerk softened her tone. "Then you should try the airline's customer service desk. They may have more specific information." Noah nodded in thanks and ran toward the Aurora Airways counter. While waiting for his turn, his phone buzzed a message from Amira. "Something's happened. I'll tell you when I see you." He breathed a sigh of relief and quickly replied, "I'm at baggage claim. What happened? Are you okay?" No response. He looked around the terminal as if Amira might suddenly appear in the sea of people. What could have kept her from leaving the plane? He wondered. Technical difficulties, a medical emergency, or something more serious. It was his turn at the counter. The clerk said that flight is being held due to a service issue. "We don't have further details. The crew is handling it." Noah stepped aside, his worry deepening. A service issue. It could be anything, an altercation between passengers or a security problem. He checked his phone again, still no new messages from Amira. He almost pressed dial for Celeste. If something was wrong, she should know, but the thought of admitting he not only showed up late, but also had no idea what his daughter was going through, stopped him. Celeste had a way of making him feel utterly inadequate as a father, and this incident would only reinforce her belief that Amira would be better off staying in New York with her mother. Instead of calling Noah, found a seat near the arrivals area. From there, he could see all passengers coming through the doors. He sat there, gripping his phone tightly, eyes never leaving the automatic doors, waiting for the moment when Amira, with her bright yellow beanie, would appear in the crowd of strangers. No matter what was happening on the plane, Noah Rivers knew one thing for sure. When his daughter walked through those airport doors, he would be there. That was the least he could do. Meanwhile, the flight had long since reached cruising altitude, yet flight attendant Langford still hadn't returned Amira Collins' beanie. Most passengers had relaxed, watching movies, reading, or dozing off, but Amira wasn't one of them. She sat upright, her eyes occasionally glancing up toward the front of the cabin where the attendants were preparing to serve drinks. The woman in business attire sitting next to her seemed to notice her unease. "That hat thing earlier was strange," she said quietly. "I've flown hundreds of times and never heard of a rule about taking off hats during the safety demonstration." Amira shrugged, trying to appear indifferent. "Must be a new rule." "Maybe," the woman replied, her voice hesitant, "or maybe someone just wanted to abuse a little bit of power they have." She extended her hand. "I'm Vanessa. What's your name, Amira?" She responded, shaking her hand lightly. "First time in Suncrest Bay. First time at my dad's house." There, Amira explained. "He moved from Riverbend a few months ago." Vanessa nodded, her expression softening with empathy. "Divorced parents, I went through that too. My dad moved from Clearview to Stonehill when I was 16. Going back and forth was exhausting." Amira was surprised that she guessed so accurately. "Yeah, pretty much. But now I just visit during holidays. New York, right?" "Yeah, I live in Brooklyn Heights." "No kidding." Vanessa smiled. "I grew up in Seaport." The world really is small. The drink cart approached their row, pushed by a different attendant. Not Langford. Amira ordered a ginger ale, and Vanessa chose tomato juice. "Do you know when we'll get our personal items back?" Amira asked quietly as she received her drink. "Personal items?" the attendant asked. "Another flight attendant took my hat during takeoff." The attendant looked a little confused. "I didn't hear about that." "Who took it?" Langford, Vanessa answered for Amira, blonde with her hair tied high. Very serious about the rules, the attendant's expression shifted slightly. There was a hint of recognition mixed with hesitation. "I'll check on that right away." "What's your hat like?" "Bright yellow, a beanie." "I'll try to help," the attendant said, then continued serving the other rows. Amira took a sip of her ginger ale, trying to focus on the in-flight entertainment screen. But her mind kept circling back to the beanie and the feeling of being unfairly singled out. "That hat isn't just an accessory, is it?" Vanessa asked, as if reading Amira's thoughts. Amira hesitated before nodding. "My dad gave it to me when I was 14 before they got divorced. I wear it almost every day. And that attendant didn't ask anyone else to take off their hats." "Right." Amira glanced around. Just as she had noticed before, people were wearing baseball caps, wide-brimmed hats, even cowboy hats, a few rows ahead. No one else had been asked to remove theirs. "No, just me." Vanessa's expression hardened. "I thought so." She raised her hand to call over the attendant who had served them earlier. "Excuse me, but my friend's hat hasn't been returned yet. It was taken by a flight attendant during takeoff. But I noticed many other people are still wearing hats without any issue." The attendant's eyes flickered. She quickly scanned the cabin. Clearly, she had just realized the inconsistency. "I'll talk to her right away. I'm really sorry about this." Amira felt both grateful to Vanessa and embarrassed. She didn't want to cause trouble or be seen as a nuisance. As a black girl, she had learned to pick her battles. "You don't have to do this," Amira whispered. "Yes, I do," Vanessa replied firmly. "I know what's going on. I've seen it too many times before. And it can't keep happening." Before Amira could respond, Langford appeared. Her face was tense, holding the yellow beanie, but not yet offering it back. "It seems there's been a misunderstanding," she said, her voice quiet but defensive. "According to airline policy, passengers must remove hats during the safety demonstration and takeoff. Then, why didn't you apply that to all passengers?" Vanessa spoke up, gesturing around the cabin where many others were still wearing hats. Langford's face stiffened. "I enforce the rules at my discretion." "At your discretion," Vanessa repeated, her voice rising. "Interesting. Because it seems like your discretion only applies to certain passengers." A few passengers in the cabin began to look over, and the atmosphere grew noticeably tense. Amira slouched down in her seat, wishing she could disappear. She just wanted her hat back without all the attention. "Ma'am, I need you to lower your voice," Langford said, her eyes locked on Vanessa. "If you have a complaint, you can submit it to customer service after we land." "I'll certainly be doing that," Vanessa responded, eyes unwavering. "Now please return this girl's property." Langford hesitated for a moment before handing the beanie to Amira. She took it, murmured a soft, "Thank you," and immediately put it back on her head, feeling a sense of safety. "Return with the soft fabric," As Langford turned to leave, the man sitting across the aisle, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "You know," he said, his voice low and full of weight, "I've been flying with this airline for 30 years. Never once has anyone asked me to take off my hat during the safety briefing." Langford froze. Her back remained straight, but she didn't turn around. After a few seconds of silence, she continued walking toward the front of the cabin. "You know," the older man said, his voice deep and full of experience, "I've been flying with this airline for 30 years, and never once has anyone asked me to take off my hat during the safety briefing." Not once. Flight attendant Langford stopped in her tracks, her back stiffening, but she didn't turn around. After a few seconds of silence, she continued walking down the aisle without saying a word. "Thank you both," Amira whispered to both Vanessa and the man. "Don't thank us." He shook his head sadly. "This shouldn't have happened." Vanessa opened her handbag, pulled out a business card, and handed it to Amira. "I work for a human rights organization in New York," she explained. "If you want to file an official complaint about this, I'd be happy to help." Amira took the card, surprised by the offer. "I'm not sure I need to. I got my hat back already." "It's up to you," Vanessa interrupted gently. "But this isn't just about the hat. It's about how some people think they have the right to treat others differently just because of how they look. And if no one speaks up, it'll never change." Amira nodded, slipping the card into her hoodie pocket. A familiar feeling swelled inside her, anger and vulnerability. But this time, it all unfolded right in front of dozens of people. She adjusted the beanie on her head, her eyes lingering on the dark window where her reflection stared back. Her soft, curly hair peeking out from the bright yellow fabric, her face both relieved and melancholic. What Amira didn't know was that the situation was about to escalate in a way no one could predict, and she was about to come face to face with the last person she ever expected to meet on this flight. Nearly 3 hours had passed since Celeste Collins finally ended the urgent call with the board of directors. Stanley Thompson remained as stubborn as ever, opposing every proposed change to the route to Suncrest Bay, until Celeste pointed out that his plan violated 2 Federal Aviation Administration regulations. The brief silence that followed had been immensely satisfying, even though it was fleeting. Celeste removed her headphones, closed her laptop, and realized she hadn't eaten anything since the quick breakfast with her daughter. She gestured to a flight attendant for a light snack, then opened her phone to check for messages. One from Noah. Rivers caught her attention. Amira mentioned something happened on the plane, hasn't deplaned yet. "Do you know anything?" Celeste quickly responded. "No." "Which flight?" A reply came almost immediately. "Aurora Airways. Flight 1829. A surge of discomfort washed over her. Aurora Airways was her airline. If there had been a serious incident, especially on a commercial flight from Harbor Central, she should have been informed, particularly since she was also in the air. She opened her email and skimmed through the operational reports. Nothing she signaled for Teresa, the lead flight attendant she had known for years. "I need information about Flight 1829 from Harbor Central to Suncrest Bay," she said quietly. "The flight landed over an hour ago, and passengers still haven't deplaned. Can you check for me?" Though surprised, Teresa remained professional. "Of course, Miss Collins. I'll ask the cockpit." As Teresa walked away, Celeste's mind kept racing through possible scenarios. Technical issues. No reason to hold passengers that long. If it were a security issue, she would have been notified immediately. A customer service issue and euphemism for conflicts on board rarely led to a complete holdup like this. Minutes later, Teresa returned, her voice lowered. "The cockpit confirms that Flight 1829 is being held at the gate due to a serious incident involving the flight attendant and a passenger. Both gate management and the customer service director have boarded the plane. A serious enough incident to hold all the passengers." Celeste asked her instincts as CEO immediately alert to potential legal and PR risks. "Yes. The young passenger has made allegations of discrimination. She says she was singled out because of her appearance, and several other passengers have corroborated her story. Celeste was taken aback. Discrimination. She repeated her mind quickly, connecting the dots. What specifically was it based on? They didn't clarify Ms. Collins. It's just the allegation that's been made and it's under investigation. Thank you, Teresa. Can you ask the captain of our flight to call the captain of Flight 1829 directly? I need to know if I need to intervene. I'll do that right away. As Teresa left, Celeste opened her phone again. No new messages from Noah, which meant the situation was still unresolved. She considered calling him, but held off without clear information. It would only add more tension to the situation. However the worry lingered, Amira was on that flight. Her daughter was on a plane being held due to a discrimination allegation by an employee of the airline Celeste ran. It was too much of a coincidence to ignore. She recalled the moment she had seen Amira at the airport, the look in her daughter's eyes, and the yellow beanie, the item linked to memories of her father. For Celeste, it had only been a teen fashion accessory, but now she realized for her daughter it was a symbol, and perhaps the spark for all this. Teresa returned her expression no longer calm. Ms. Collins, I've contacted the captain. The situation on Flight 1829 is indeed serious. The young passenger has accused the flight attendant of targeting her to remove her hat, while many other passengers were allowed to keep theirs. Several passengers have come forward to confirm her story. Celeste Collins felt her stomach tighten. A young female passenger with a hat, it has to be Amira. She whispered to herself, a cold feeling like a knife cutting through her heart. Do you know the name of the passenger filing the complaint? She asked, though she already knew the answer. Teresa hesitated. I don't have that information, but the captain did say the passenger is a minor traveling alone. Celeste stood up abruptly before Teresa could finish. I need to speak to the captain right now. On Flight 1829, the atmosphere in the cabin had grown heavier after the second confrontation between Amira and flight attendant Langford. What had started as a small argument over the beanie had now escalated into a bigger issue with several passengers involved and the tension palpable throughout the cabin. After reluctantly returning the beanie, Langford had retreated toward the front of the plane, whispering tensely to the other flight attendants. Occasionally their eyes would glance toward Amira's row, as if confirming that she was the topic of their whispered discussions. They're banding together, Vanessa muttered. Typical reaction when someone's called out for their bad behavior. Amira slouched deeply in her seat, wishing she could disappear. She had never wanted this to happen, let alone in front of dozens of strangers. All she wanted was her familiar beanie, a piece of comforting memory amidst the changes of her life between two homes. At that moment, the announcement system chimed. Ladies and gentlemen, we are descending toward Suncrest Bay. Please fasten your seatbelts and prepare for landing. The flight attendants began checking the cabin and the lights dimmed. Langford avoided Amira's row, entirely sending another attendant to replace her. The plane landed safely, turning into the waiting gate with a collective sigh of relief. Passengers started to rise, retrieving their luggage from the overhead bins. Amira remained seated, unhurried, sending a text to her dad. I've landed. But she didn't mention anything about what had happened on the plane. She didn't want to worry him or add any more trouble if he was still caught up in work. The seatbelt sign turned off. People began to file out down the aisle. Amira stayed where she was, her gaze following the flow of people trying to calm herself. Then the lead flight attendant approached her, expression cautious but gentle. Excuse me, sweetheart, could you please stay behind after the other passengers disembark? Our customer service manager would like to speak with you about the situation on the flight. Before Amira could respond, Vanessa spoke up. Is she being detained? No, of course not. The lead attendant quickly replied. We just want to handle the matter properly. If that's the case, she can leave the plane like everyone else. Vanessa responded firmly. If the airline wants to follow up, they can do it through the proper channels. The lead attendant hesitated, her gaze flickering between professionalism and confusion. She's a minor traveling alone. Vanessa continued, her voice resolute. If you want to discuss anything further, there must be a legal guardian present. That information immediately changed the attendant's demeanor. I wasn't aware of that. If that's the case, does she have someone picking her up at the airport, her dad? But I'm not sure if he's here yet, Amira answered softly. All right. The attendant nodded. Once the plane is empty, I'll take you to the arrival area to find your dad. If you both agree, we can continue the discussion there. Amira nodded. Vanessa remained skeptical. I'll go with her, Vanessa said, pulling another business card from her handbag. This one, not from the Human Rights Organization, but a professional card. I'm a lawyer with the Equal Justice Initiative. I'm here to ensure this young lady's legal rights are respected. The lead attendant took the card, her face remaining neutral, but it was clear the situation had taken on a new level. We just want to handle this properly, she said. As the conversation unfolded, several passengers nearby had stopped and started watching. Some turned to look at them with curiosity. Others pretended to be busy, but their ears were tuned to every word. Oh, how embarrassing, Amira whispered. I understand, Vanessa replied gently. But sometimes, when you stand up for yourself, it creates waves. You didn't anticipate. You didn't do anything wrong. The plane gradually emptied with only a few passengers remaining around Amira, either delayed by the slow-moving crowd or staying behind quietly to show support. The older man sitting by the aisle stood up, grabbed his bag, and turned to say, You really showed a lot of courage. I'll file a formal complaint with the airline about what I witnessed today. Amira smiled, faintly grateful. Then only she. Vanessa and a young woman a few rows ahead, a black woman who had smiled in understanding. When the incident began, remained on the plane, flight attendant, Langford stood near the cockpit. Her posture stiff, her face a mixture of defiance and tension. The lead attendant approached and whispered something to her, but the words didn't reach Amira's ears. Only the tension in their glances and movements was clear. Finally, the lead attendant turned back to Amira and Vanessa. The customer service manager is at the gate now. If you both would like, I can escort you off the plane right now. Amira bent down to grab her backpack, adjusting the yellow beanie on her head as a silent declaration of pride, as she and Vanessa exited the plane via the jet bridge. Amira briefly noticed the young black woman who had silently supported her was also packing up to leave. Outside the jet bridge, a man in a suit was waiting his name tag, showing he was the customer service manager. Behind him stood Noah Rivers, Amira's father, his face filled with confusion and concern. Dad, Amira called relief flooding her chest. As she saw the familiar face amidst the chaos, Noah stepped forward and pulled his daughter into a tight hug. What's going on? Why were you kept on the plane? Before Amira could respond, the jet bridge door opened again and everyone turned to look. A collective sigh of surprise and recognition rippled through the room when Celeste Collins stepped through. Her face was like a storm that had erupted after a period of calm. Mom, Amira exclaimed, shock overwhelming all other emotions. What are you doing here? Celeste scanned the room first, at her daughter, then at her ex-husband, and finally at the man in the suit. His face went from pale to ghostly white. Mr. Mills, he stammered. We didn't know. Clearly Celeste cut him off, her voice dangerously calm, exactly the tone Amira knew meant her mother was about to make something big happen. Now, can someone explain to me why my daughter was just discriminated against on a flight operated by the airline I run? Silence complete. Silence. My daughter, the customer service manager, stammered. Yes, Celeste replied. And I want an explanation that starts with Why Flight Attendant Langford thought it was necessary to impose a rule that doesn't even exist on my daughter and no one else. The jet bridge door opened again. Flight Attendant Langford stepped out freezing when she saw Celeste Collins. Ms. Langford, perhaps you should explain directly to me, the CEO of Aurora Airways and the mother of the girl you targeted today. Langford's face turned as white as a sheet. Her mouth opened and closed several times, but no words came out. Amira stood between her parents, the yellow beanie, now the only bright spot in a scene frozen in time, a moment when three very different worlds collided in a way none of them could have predicted when they woke up this morning. In the VIP lounge meeting room of Aurora Airways at Suncrest Bay, Celeste Collins sat at the head of the table, her posture straight as if she were at a board meeting rather than a furious mother. To her right was Amira, the yellow beanie still on her head, a sign that she wouldn't back down. To her left was Noah, continuously twirling the pen in his hand, clearly uncomfortable being dragged into a corporate conflict. Opposite them sat Bradford Mills, the station manager at Suncrest Bay Airport, who had been called in immediately after Celeste appeared. Next to him was Langford, her face lowered, the arrogance she had once displayed completely shattered now that she knew she had targeted the CEO's daughter. Let me be clear, Celeste spoke, cutting through the heavy atmosphere. The fact that Amira is my daughter has nothing to do with how this situation should be handled. What matters is that a passenger was discriminated against based on how she looks. Bradford nodded quickly. Of course, Ms. Collins will thoroughly investigate this matter. The investigation is happening right now. Celeste interrupted, her voice as cold as steel. Ms. Langford, I'm still waiting for an explanation. Langford finally looked up, her gaze, a mix of fear and a weak attempt at defense. Ms. Collins, I was just following company policy as I understood it regarding the removal of hats during the safety demonstration. If I misunderstood or applied that policy incorrectly, I sincerely apologize. Interesting, Celeste responded, her eyes fixed on the flight attendant. Because I personally reviewed the passenger policies last month. There is no clause that bans hats during the safety demonstration unless the hat obstructs the oxygen mask. My daughter's beanie doesn't. Langford flushed. I may have misunderstood. Misunderstood, Celeste repeated. But according to several witnesses, including a lawyer seated next to my daughter, you didn't apply this non-existent policy to any other passengers. Can you explain why? Celeste asked, her eyes still fixed on Flight Attendant Langford. But before she could respond, Noah spoke up. Celeste, maybe we should talk about this later. Amira's had a long day, and we have plans tonight. Celeste glanced at her ex-husband, her gaze softening slightly. You're right, Noah. This is not how any of us wanted to spend our afternoon. She turned back to Bradford. I want a full written report on this by Monday morning, including statements from the flight crew and the passengers who witnessed the incident. Ms. Langford will be suspended pending investigation. Bradford nodded, clearly relieved to have clear direction. Yes. Ms. Collins, and on behalf of the airline, I sincerely apologize to you and your daughter for this unfortunate experience. Don't apologize to me. Celeste cut him off, her voice sharp. Apologize to Amira. She's the one who was humiliated in front of a plane full of passengers. All eyes turned to Amira, who shifted uncomfortably under the attention. After a brief hesitation, Langford spoke up. I apologize for making you feel uncomfortable. I didn't intend to hurt you. Amira looked directly into her eyes, searching for sincerity, but only finding a defensive wall. But you did hurt me, she said softly. You took my hat, only my hat. You made me feel like I did something wrong when I didn't do anything at all. I was just following the company policy as I understood it, Langford retorted, a hint of irritation creeping back. A policy that only applies to my black daughter Celeste, asked sharply. Her calm exterior belying the fury bubbling beneath Langford's face flushed red. I never what? Celeste pushed her voice cold. Never discriminate. Never apply arbitrary rules based on someone's appearance. Then, why did this happen today, unless you admit you either misunderstood or are trying to avoid accountability? Noah gently placed his hand over Celeste's. Celeste. She understands now. Celeste took a deep breath, trying to rein in her emotions. You're right. This isn't going to solve anything. She turned back to Bradford. As I said, I want the entire training department to review the customer service procedures, especially regarding recognizing and preventing implicit bias when interacting with passengers. Bradford quickly took notes on his tablet. Yes, Ms. Collins will make sure to implement this. Celeste stood up, signaling the end of the meeting. Amira, Noah, I think you both have plans for tonight, right? Don't let this ruin your time together. People began to gather their things, but Amira remained seated, looking up at her mother with a swirl of emotions in her eyes. How did you know what was happening? She asked. I thought you were flying to Chicago. Celeste smiled softly. I was flying, but when your dad texted me saying something had happened on your flight, I checked and saw it was an Aurora Airways flight. I had the pilot contact air traffic control, and after getting the details, I decided to change the flight route to Suncrest Bay. Change the route. Amira's eyes widened. Do you have the authority to do that? I'm the CEO. Celeste shrugged. In special cases, yes. And when I found out my daughter was held on a plane because of discrimination, that was a special case. Amira stood up, adjusting the yellow beanie, as she always did. You didn't have to do that. I could have handled it. I know, Celeste replied gently, reaching out to adjust the beanie for her. And I'm proud of you for handling it so well. But you shouldn't have to endure that on your own. Noah draped his arm over Amira's shoulder. Your mom's right, and I'm really glad she got here in time. I wouldn't have known what to do if I had faced that on my own. Celeste gave a small smile like a ray of sunshine breaking through the usual storm in their relationship. You would have figured it out, like you always do. Normally, Noah would have been annoyed by such a backhanded compliment, but today he nodded, accepting it as a peace offering. As they left the meeting room, Vanessa was waiting in the lounge area, her face lighting up when she saw Amira. Finally, I found you, she said. Walking over, I just wanted to make sure you're okay before I catch my next flight. I'm okay. Amira nodded. Thanks to you. If you hadn't spoken up, don't mention it. Vanessa smiled. Sometimes everyone needs someone to have their back. She extended her hand to Celeste. We didn't properly introduce ourselves earlier. Vanessa Chen, Equal Justice Initiative. Celeste shook her hand firmly. Celeste Collins. Thank you for standing up for my daughter when I couldn't be there. Your daughter is very strong, Vanessa responded. She handled everything with such calm and maturity. She turned to Amira. Don't lose my business card. And remember, your voice matters. Don't let anyone make you think otherwise. As Vanessa left, Celeste turned to the father and daughter. I should go now. The executive team is probably freaking out over me changing the flight path without authorization. What about your meeting in Chicago? Noah asked. Celeste shrugged. I'll reschedule. Some things are more important. She pulled Amira into a tight hug. Call me anytime I will, Amira whispered, and thank you for coming. Celeste's eyes misted as she let go of her daughter. Always, sweetheart, always. As she walked away, talking on the phone while beginning to handle the fallout from her impromptu detour, Amira turned to her father. Well, this definitely wasn't how I imagined my visit starting. Noah laughed out loud, the tension easing. You just never know, do you? I thought I aged 10 years waiting for you to get off that plane, Noah said, squeezing his daughter's shoulder gently. Are you hungry? I know a great burger place not far from here. I'm starving, Amira admitted. But can we stop by somewhere first, Dad? I want to pick up a postcard or something for Vanessa. To thank her, Noah nodded, pride swelling in his chest as he looked at his daughter, standing strong, the yellow beanie still standing out on her head, the girl who had overcome prejudice and still held gratitude for the one person who stood by her. Of course, anything you want, sweetheart. 6 months later, in the main hall of Aurora Airways headquarters, Celeste Collins stood at the podium addressing a room full of employees and reporters. Behind her, a large screen displayed the airline's new campaign, "Everyone Has the Right to Belong," in the sky. 6 months ago, an incident on one of our flights forced us to confront a truth that is hard to accept. Celeste began, her voice firm and resolute. Despite the company's stated values and commitment to equality, we failed to create an environment where every passenger truly feels welcomed and respected. The room was completely silent, all eyes on the powerful woman who had turned a public relations crisis into a model of corporate responsibility and reform. "That incident involved my own daughter," she continued, "but it could have happened to anyone. Your children, your parents, your loved ones, or your friends. And the question we had to ask ourselves was, what kind of company do we want to be? A company that makes excuses and defends wrongdoing, or a company that faces its shortcomings and commits to real change?" In the audience, Amira sat between Noah and Vanessa, who was now the official advisor on diversity and inclusion for the Aurora Airways board. Today, the yellow beanie was not on her head instead. Her natural curly hair was carefully styled, paired with a sleek navy blue dress, an intentional choice for her first public appearance as the CEO's daughter. Today, I'm proud to announce that all Aurora employees have completed our new comprehensive training program developed in collaboration with the Equal Justice Initiative. Celeste continued, "But training alone is not enough. That's why we've made structural changes to ensure accountability at every level." She outlined the details: a more diverse hiring process, transparent feedback mechanisms for bias incidents, regular cultural audits, and the creation of an advisory board with representatives from diverse communities. But perhaps the most important change isn't in the written documents or training materials. Her voice softened. It's the change in perspective, when we truly see each other not through the lens of bias, but as individuals with our own stories, struggles, and strengths. Her gaze found Amira, and between them was a silent bond, a place where a personal incident had paved the way for collective change. The yellow beanie incident, as we call it internally, could have easily been dismissed as a misunderstanding. But we chose to see it as a wake-up call that our commitment to equality isn't just a corporate vision. It has to be lived every day in every interaction with every passenger who entrusts us with their journey. At the post-conference reception, a young, shy flight attendant approached Amira holding a glass of soda. "I hope I'm not bothering you," she said quietly. "But I just wanted to thank you. Your story is the reason I applied to Aurora Airways. I wanted to work at a place that truly acts for justice." Amira smiled, still not fully used to being a symbol of change. "I'm glad something positive came out of that." "More than positive," the flight attendant affirmed. "You and your mom have changed the culture of an entire airline." "That's incredible." As the young woman left, Noah walked over with 2 small plates of food. "Got a new fan," he teased, handing Amira a plate. "Kind of," Amira replied, taking the plate. "It's strange, Dad. 6 months ago, I was just the girl who had her hat taken. Now people treat me like a symbol." Noah looked at his daughter, his gaze softening. "Because you are a symbol, not because you wanted to be, but because you stood firm when others stayed silent. You did the right thing when the easiest thing would have been to ignore it." Celeste joined in, looking more at ease than ever, despite just finishing a major event. "The press response has been very positive," she announced. "Our ticket sales have increased 15% since launching the campaign." See, Noah laughed. "Doing the right thing is good business strategy." "Who knew?" Celeste rolled her eyes but still smiled. "Yes, Thank you, Noah. I'll be sure to include that in the next shareholder report. Their familiar banter, once heavy after the divorce, now felt light thanks to everything they'd gone through to support Amira through the ordeal. Vanessa appeared elegant in a gray suit. "The media is going crazy over this story," she said. "3 reporters have asked for exclusive interviews about the yellow beanie revolution." Amira groaned. "Oh no, don't tell me they're actually calling it that." Afraid so, Vanessa laughed. "But hey, what better legacy is there? You've really helped bring about real change, Amira. Be proud of that." As the evening wound down, Amira reflected on the journey over the past 6 months. From a moment of humiliation on the plane, everything had grown beyond her expectations, leading to an organizational transformation, rekindling family bonds, and most importantly, helping her realize the true power of her own voice. As they left the airport lounge, Celeste gently hugged her daughter. "You know," she whispered, "I've spent my whole career breaking down barriers and creating opportunities for people who look like me. But the day you stood up for yourself on that flight, that may be the moment I'm most proud of in my life." Amira leaned into her mother's embrace, thinking of the yellow beanie now proudly displayed in a glass case in her room, not as a symbol of shame, but as proof of her growth. "I learned from the best," she replied softly. Celeste smiled, squeezing her daughter's shoulder. "No, my love, I think we all learn from you." As they walked outside, the night sky was lit with stars like distant airplane lights, thousands of journeys in progress, each with its own story and all worthy of the vast embracing sky. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows of Noah's apartment as Amira packed her things into her suitcase. The week at Lowe's Angels, which had begun with chaos, had turned into the most meaningful time she and her father had spent together since their divorce. "Are you sure you don't want to stay a few more days?" Noah leaned against the doorframe, his eyes a mix of pride and wistfulness. "Your mom said it's fine, just change the flight." Amira smiled, grateful for the offer. "I can't skip more school, Dad. But this trip, it's been really great. Not what I expected, but in a good way." Noah nodded, understanding exactly what his daughter meant. No one had expected the beanie incident to turn this trip from a normal vacation into a deep bonding experience. "You know your mom really is something," Noah said, shaking his head in half surprise, half admiration. "When she runs that corporate machine, it's like a whirlwind with perfect organization." "Always like that," Amira replied gently, placing the beanie, now a symbol, on top of her suitcase. "But this is the first time I've seen her use that power for something so personal." Noah sat on the bed, his expression thoughtful. "When your mom and I divorced, the hardest part for me was feeling like I could never catch up with her drive and pace. She's always 10 steps ahead, always in control of everything." "Not always," Amira said, recalling her mother's face when she appeared on the jet bridge, angry yet scared. That day, Mom was really scared, not the fear of the CEO, but the fear of a mother, because nothing is more important to her than you, Noah replied gently. "No matter what differences we had, that was always the one thing we both agreed on." Amira paused, looking at her father with deep appreciation. Over the past week, Noah had been by her side attending meetings with the airline, answering press calls, and always creating a safe space for her to express her feelings. "You've been amazing too," she said. "I know this wasn't in the original plan." Noah chuckled. "Definitely not. I plan to teach you how to surf. Take you to the movie studio. Not how to handle a PR crisis. Next time." Then Amira suggested, her eyes sparkling with hope. "Definitely next time," Noah promised. "But no drama. Okay, we should head to the airport early, though. No matter how special you are, being late is never fun." She zipped up her suitcase, her gaze drifting over the room that had been hers for a week. It still felt a little unfamiliar, but it had left its mark. The book on the table, the sketch of the view from the window, the seashells collected from the beach. Next time I'll make this place your place, Noah said. Seeing her gaze, I'll repaint the walls, hang up some posters you like. So it feels like home, not just a place to stop by. Amira nodded, warmth flooding her heart. Though the distance was real, Noah was trying to make Los Angeles a second home for her. At the airport, Aurora Airways had arranged for a personal assistant to escort them from the gate to the VIP lounge while they waited to board. Although Amira felt a little embarrassed, she understood it was her mother's effort to ensure this flight would be smoother and more comfortable. "Ms. Williams asked me to ensure everything goes smoothly for your trip today," the attendant said as they entered the lounge. "Is there anything else you need? I'm fine, thank you," Amira replied, still not used to being known as the CEO's daughter. As the attendant left, Noah looked at Amira seriously. "I keep thinking about what your mom said in the meeting. That could happen to any child. But the truth is, it happened to you." Amira looked up, her eyes calm, waiting for him to continue. "And you did what many adults wouldn't dare to. You stood up. You didn't let it define you. You made it the catalyst for change." She was silent for a moment, then smiled. "I think I just didn't want to stay silent. And sometimes," Noah said, "it's that simple thing that changes the world." Amira nodded, still unsure of what her father was trying to say. "Here's the thing," Noah continued. "What happened to you? It wasn't about being the daughter of the CEO or being my daughter. It was about Amira. And I just want you to know that I'm so proud of the way you handled it. Not just in that moment, but in everything you've done. Since I didn't really do anything special," Amira gently disagreed. "Mom's the one who made the big change." "No," Noah replied firmly. "Your mom has the power of the company, but you were the one who stood up when that flight attendant tried to push you aside. You're the one who spoke up in those meetings, the one who demanded the new training program be based on real experience, not just company slogans." Amira had never thought of it that way. She had always seen herself as just the one who sparked things, not the one who directly made change happen. But now she realized her true role. "I guess I did do that," she admitted, a small smile breaking through. "And that's you, not the daughter of anyone but Amira Williams. A young woman who knows her worth and isn't afraid to speak up when something's wrong." The boarding announcement interrupted their conversation. The VIP service attendant returned to guide Amira to the gate. Noah walked with her, his hand gently resting on her shoulder. At the security checkpoint where they had to part ways, Noah hugged his daughter tightly. "I love you, kiddo, whether you're wearing the yellow beanie or not." "I love you too, Dad," Amira replied, fighting back an unexpected tear. "Thanks for everything this week." As she walked through security, she took the yellow beanie from her backpack and placed it on her head, not for warmth, but as a quiet declaration, a symbol of self-respect, growth, and her own voice. On the plane, the flight attendant welcomed her with a warm smile, completely free from any bias like the last time. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Williams. We're honored to have you with us today." Amira nodded, settling into her seat by the window, gazing out at the golden California sun. As the plane began to taxi, she thought about the journey she had just completed, not just from the East Coast to the West, but the journey of realizing her own strength. At the Aurora Airways headquarters, Celeste was heading to her office, receiving congratulations from employees following the press conference announcing the Sky for All campaign. When she entered her office, she found Michael, her assistant, waiting with a tablet and a large bouquet of bright yellow flowers. "The board is ready for the quarterly meeting," he informed her. "And these just came in." From PR, Celeste asked, walking toward her desk. "No." Michael smiled. "From Noah and Amira. The card says, 'To the woman who turned chaos into hope, proud of Mom.'" Celeste's throat tightened. The past 6 months had not only changed the company, but had also healed the rifts in her co-parenting relationship with Noah. "I'll join the meeting in 5 minutes," she said, holding back her emotions. Sitting down, her eyes landed on the new photo frame on her desk, Celeste and Amira together at the airline's hangar. One generation in a CEO suit. One generation in a yellow beanie. Two very different people united by a common mission. The yellow beanie incident may have been just one of thousands, but thanks to courage and determination, it had become the spark for change, not only within the company, but in society's perspective. As she connected to the board meeting, Celeste carried with her a profound understanding. Big changes often begin with very small things, a single action daring to say, "I deserve to be respected," a yellow beanie, a voice that refuses to stay silent. When Amira stepped off the plane with the yellow beanie on her head, she was no longer the girl who had been humiliated between the seats of the airplane. She was a symbol of resilience, a representative of a generation that refuses to remain silent in the face of injustice. And when her mother, Celeste Williams, turned her anger into action, no one could call the incident a small thing anymore. 6 months later, the airline that once remained silent had become a model of fairness and inclusivity in the industry. No longer just a slogan on paper, but a policy now heard through voices that had been ignored for so long. The yellow beanie, now more than just a gift from her father, was a symbol of transformation, of the belief that every person, no matter where they are, has the right to be respected and heard. And perhaps the most beautiful thing wasn't the result, but the journey they walked together. A girl who dared to stand up, a mother who chose action over silence, a father learning how to support from the sidelines, and a society that started to change step by step, one at a time. If this story has touched you, leave a like, share this video with someone who could use a little hope, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to keep following meaningful stories like this one. Because each of us deserves a place in this vast sky. Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.